I think a lot of coaches in our space operate out of the assumption it's like, if I do a great job with program design and clients are seeing results, that I'm going to be a successful coach. And while there's definitely like an element of truth in that, it's not the whole truth. And a lot of people, I think, get frustrated who are really good coaches. And honestly, that was something that I believed for such a long time. And it's not that I don't believe that anymore, but I think that if you can kind of step away from that and kind of take a bit of a zoomed out view of what's actually going on, it allows you to see what requirements are actually necessary to be what I would consider to be like a really great coach. And if you stick around to the end, I'll actually give you a bonus one that I think is probably the most important of them all. And the first one is you have to be excited to do the job well, which at first I think is kind of counterintuitive, where it's like, no, if you're a good coach, you'll do a good job either way. And I don't necessarily think that's entirely true. I think if coaches get bored or if they get indifferent, they end up just like checking off the boxes and not really, providing their clients with an excellent service or the service that they're capable of providing. So for coaches, it's necessary to find some sort of a flywheel or a process that allows you to stay engaged in what you're doing. And I think at least a part of that is staying excited in what you're doing. Like if you are excited to write someone's programming, if you're excited to communicate with them and try to get them closer to their goals, then you're just going to be a much better coach to that person. And that's one of the things that's necessary to be a good coach, is that you tailor your process to the individual that's in front of you. And as a coach, the thought of your clients reaching like new personal bests, the idea of them achieving whatever individual goals that they have, and for them to be striving to be at their best, all those things should make you really excited. And if they're not making you excited anymore, you now have lost your ability to be a good coach. So it's important that, again, you're able to find some sort of a flywheel or a process to allow yourself to stay passionate about what you're doing ultimately. And for me, I think one of the things that allows you to do this and stay somewhat excited and engaged in what you're doing on a long-term basis, not just like in the short term, like being excited in that sense. It's like a sustained excitement about what you're doing. It's like so almost like a sense of like wonder about what your clients or yourself can achieve in what you're doing. And I think one of the things that allows you to kind of continue to spur that on is you have to be learning, right? So that's the second one, is that you have to be learning all the time. And I think there's maybe 3 things as a part of that process for me as a coach that I think has been really valuable, and I see in other coaches who are also what I would consider to be excellent coaches. One is education, right? So it's actually like learning the new stuff and like keeping a touch on the things that are just being updated in the literature, and then also like continuing to upgrade your best practices as a coach. And to me, this is one of the primary reasons why coaches need to hire coaches, right? Like for me, I have a coach. One of the reasons for that is because it helps me to see outside of my own little bias and sphere and get a little bit more of a objective approach, right? And that's good for me as an athlete. It's also good for me as a coach to be able to see how someone else operates and how they interact with people and how they do things, right? It's just to have a bit of a look under the hood at how things are operating. So that first one is education. It's reading, it's learning, it's engaging with other people who are like-minded. And then next would be like experimentation. So it's education, experimentation. So I think ideally this is done on yourself, right? This is something where you have a little bit of bandwidth or wiggle room or opportunities throughout your week on a recurring basis that are a little bit open-ended. And that allows you to play with new protocols. It allows you to try different things. It allows you to hone your craft, play with different types of workouts or different styles of programming or different types of equipment or, new toys and things, right? Like all of that stuff is really engaging and fun, or at least can be as a coach. So finding opportunities throughout your week to reserve time to do that sort of thing, I believe is really important. So it's education, experimentation, and then finally it's application, right? So it's taking this and then applying it and trying it out on athletes, right? And this is why there's that experimentation first before you go into application, because not that it's 100% wrong to, do some educated trial and error on an athlete. I think at times that's necessary, and probably the only person that could actually work on might be them, right? If they have a very specific problem, it's like, let's try this out for a little bit. Let's see if it works. But I also think there's times where where coaches just kind of give things to athletes and they are just kind of like, I don't know if this is going to work or not. And if you just do too much of that, you're going to start blunting clients' results, because like at the end of the day, if you haven't done something before and you don't know, like for this particular type of client, this is highly likely to work. I would say most of the time you need to going towards those things. And then on occasion, you can kind of pull back and say, okay, I think based on my experience with other athletes similar to you, and I think my experience with this type of protocol, I think this could work, but I'm not really entirely sure. And I think sometimes even if you're honest with athletes about that process, that can actually lead to more buy-in, or it can lead to being like them feeling like open enough where they can express like, I don't know if this is right for me, or I don't think this is the right direction for us to go. And it allows a little bit more of an open dialogue, which I think is also really important for athletes and coaches. So education, experimentation, and application is sort of that cycle that you want to be going through in that learning process. Quick disclaimer before this final point, I will say that this is for coaches of competitive athletes. I realize not all coaches are coaching people who are competitive, or that's like their primary demographic that they're working with, so this might not apply. If you're working with general fitness people, as long as you care about them and you have good, sound principles that you're working off of, you're probably going to be fine. I think when you start working with higher level athletes, or certainly like people who are trying to be the very best at what they're doing, you as a coach have had to have dedicated yourself to being the very best at something at some point. I know that's pretty broad, but I think that is what, the highest level athlete, that's all you're doing. Is like you're pouring all of yourself into one singular thing, and can feel like that's almost the entirety of your identity at times if you're really fully engaged in what you're doing. And certainly I think as a coach, you can help someone create a more well-rounded, robust sense of self in what they're doing. So if they do fall flat in a competition, they're not crushed by it. And like things like that are obviously really important. But I think as a coach, having the experience of going through, you know what, I might not have been the best athlete in whatever it was, right? And this is what I'm getting at, is like you didn't have to be an elite athlete in whatever discipline you're doing to coach someone at a high level in that discipline. And in some ways, there might be things that are extremely limiting because you're in that situation, right? Even though you might have more of the resources that are available to you at that point. Anyway, my point being, if at some point you've dedicated yourself to some endeavor where it requires so much of yourself, and now you understand the struggle in that, that's a very important thing for you to be able to relate to your athletes as they're going through something. And there's lots of people who haven't done that, frankly, right? Who haven't really gone all in on something, or haven't really fully applied themselves and like kind of put themselves out there and been okay with saying like, you know, I actually really care about this thing and I've put all of myself into it, and like, here it is, right? Obviously, like a lot of people just never do that. And I think in order to talk on the wavelength that those athletes, I think, relate to and will respond best to, you've had to have done that at some point if you want to be able to talk to athletes on that level. So again, that's something that is certainly unique to a competitive population of athletes. But if that's what you're aspiring to be as a coach, I think finding some way or some area to do that, if you haven't already, is actually going to be necessary for you to fully engage in coaching those people to the best degree that you possibly can. So two things I want to reiterate with that. One is that you don't have to be an elite athlete in whatever field you're doing, right? Just because you weren't a CrossFit Games athlete doesn't mean that you couldn't coach CrossFit Games athletes. Two would be like, just because you haven't applied yourself in the particular discipline that you're coaching someone doesn't mean that you can't be an excellent coach in that discipline, provided that you've worked really hard and applied yourself in some other discipline. Again, say I was a college wrestler and I poured everything I had into being the best I could and trying to go as far as I could into the postseason, for example, right? Even if I was a mediocre college wrestler, which I was, even if that was the case, right? Like I have the experience of doing that. Is it possible that I have now a knowledge of CrossFit and I can coach people to a high level on that without ever having done it? For sure. Yeah, 100%. However, obviously the more you've engaged in an activity, it's also, there's going to be specific things that you get that are an advantage because you've actually done that specific thing. Like, because I've done triathlon in my past, I have a much better, I'm just more confident and more aware of the requirements that the triathlete has when they're going through their training. And I feel much more just well-versed in being able to actually write quality training and like what they actually need versus if I hadn't done that, right? So there's just going to be naturally things that like, okay, if I've done this event, even if it hasn't been on a high level, I can go to be able to relate to that person a lot better. So I think engaging in, at least in a recreational sense, at some point is probably also super helpful. So those are just some thoughts on like, if you are coaching higher level athletes, or especially people who are at an elite level, that's just going to be start being more and more of an important conversation to have. Finally, the bonus tip is to stay the course, right? You have to stay the course. If you are a coach who's watching this and you're like, yeah, 1 through 3, got it nailed down. I don't know why I'm not having more success. I don't know why I don't have better clients, more successful athletes. I'm writing great designs. It's like, sometimes you just have to put in your time, right? And that's, honestly hard to swallow for, I think, a lot of coaches. That was certainly for me in my earlier career. And to be honest, that's still the case for me, right? Like, there are certain things, just because I've been around longer, I'm at an advantage for. Just because I've seen more, I've worked with more different types of athletes. Honestly, I'm just a better coach now than I was 2 to 3 years ago, right? It wasn't that I didn't care then. It wasn't that I didn't know how to coach well then. It's just that I have more experience and I'm just frankly a better coach. Now, I think oftentimes the challenge here is that coaching is hard, right? Like, just straight up, it's a challenge, right? The people who get into coaching, they're not doing it for money. They're not doing it for fame, right? They're doing it because they care about people and they care about whatever discipline they're doing, right? Like for me, I really enjoy CrossFit and I want to coach people to CrossFit in the highest level possible because I want to see people succeed and I want to see my people succeed, right? And I care about them a lot. I want them to do the very best that they can. And that was number one, right? You have to be excited about it. And for me, working with those athletes is exciting. Getting them to their best is really exciting for me. So it would be very easy of me to get excited and to just burn the candle at both ends and be burnt out from the coaching industry as a whole because of the endless things that are required as a coach. And you're on all the time and all the different reasons, right? There's lots of reasons why coaches get burnt out. But the reality is you have to balance staying in it for as long as possible so that you can actually get really good at your craft. And also just have like the opportunity to work with better athletes. Like better athletes, you have to prove that you can handle people of their caliber because, chances are you're not going to work with anybody at a certain level until you've kind of proven that you can do that. So you have to stay in it long enough where you have those opportunities while also continuing to care about people, right? Because I think that's the other thing is like, if people care about their athletes so much that they invest really heavily in them and then they get burned out because, they get burned by a client or, they just are emotionally invested and that tends to lead to burnout. And I think if you can just keep doing what you're doing and finding ways to recharge yourself and to stay actually caring about your clients and to provide them with the best service that you possibly can, that's going to allow itself to you getting better and better clients and you building up a reputation as someone who actually cares about your people and takes care of them and gets them to the best, right? And that's what's actually going to be required if you want to be a great coach. So you have to find a balance of why you actually started doing the thing in the first place with finding ways that allow you to stay in it for as long as you possibly can. So not an easy task, but one that's worth doing.